Hey gang, we're in Texas. We're about 6 miles northeast of Hamilton that direction, and we're on this little country road, 215 at 216, and right over there is the Leon River, a very famous river here, and this is in a little bit of a valley. They call it the Warleen Valley, some call it the Warland Valley, but something amazing history happened here, amazing heroic story. A heroine, her name was Amelia Ann Whitney, very famous story, but I wanted to come to this place, take you guys here. It's all private property, unfortunately, but we'll get some drone footage because basically right over there is where it happened, where the Leon River snakes around right over there. And there was a little log cabin schoolhouse here back in 1867. Right back in there, right on the banks of the south bank of the Leon. And that's where Amelia was. Well, they call her Ann Whitney. I think she was 33 years old, and she had, maybe 20 students in the little log cabin. July 11th, 1867. It was about 1 p.m. in the afternoon in the valley here, a hot day. Everything was great. And then one of the little girls she had called the kids in to sit down, probably out for lunch recess, and she called them in, and one of the little girls, a daughter of an Alex Powers, she was looking out by the doorway, she coming in, and she saw some riders coming down from the other direction. Now, the way the valley is off this road, now this would be looking south, and there's a big rise. You can't really see it here. But if you can just imagine, there were, in the schoolhouse here, this road wasn't here, and they were probably looking up in this direction. And down were these riders that were coming. And the little girl, she said, Miss Whitney, those are Indians. Indians are coming. She could see that they had like bows and arrows. And Whitney kind of shrugged her off. She was sitting at her desk. Everybody sit down, calm down. It's just some cowhands coming. She was expecting, I guess, some ranchers to come. I mean, this area was just settled at the time. It was still very dangerous, Comanche. So you would think, but anyway, finally the little girl, she was just persistent, closed the front door. But I guess this cabin over here had these, the chinking wasn't there. There were like big cracks and things. And the little girl was sitting there looking, Alex Powers' daughter, looking out the window. She's like, they're Indians, and describing them. Finally, Ann Whitney got up from her desk, and she opened the door, and she saw that, in fact, they looked like Comanche, and they were stopped about 100 yards away by her saddle horse. Why it was 100 yards away, I'm not sure, but there was a saddle horse that they were checking out, and of course they were probably sizing it up and sizing the situation up and what they would do. And she knew what was coming. It was not going to be good. So the first thing that Ann did was very heroic, as she got the kids. Now imagine the Comanche are there, and the schoolhouse is down here on the riverbank, and she got the kids out the bottom. They called it the bottom, which would be like probably right over there. And she got the kids out the back window without them seeing. All the kids except 4. There was a boy named John Kuykendall and another boy named Lewis Lewis Manning and their two sisters, and one of the little girls. One of the little girls was sick, and she was holding on the skirt of the teacher, but she got all the kids out, and they hid. And of course, at that point, by then, the Comanche, as they were described, were upon them, and they were trying to barge the door in, and through the cracks they could see that teacher Whitney was in there with the kids, and they started shooting arrows through the cracks, and they started hitting poor Ann Whitney. Now there you can see the river. I'll see if I can zoom in for you a little bit. Yeah, right down there. So they're shooting arrows into her through the cracks, and they're trying to barge the door down, and they're getting in. But Ann Whitney is screaming, and she's getting hit with arrows, and she says, "Please just let the children go. Just let all the children go. You can kill me, you can have me." And that was just unbelievable. She had 18 arrows in her, and they were getting in, and more arrows were coming, and she was able to get the two girls got out, and through the crack, one of the Comanche shot the girl in the back, the little girl. She was wounded. She didn't die, okay? She did get out, and the two boys couldn't get out in time, and they hid. There was a loose plank in the floor, and they got under the floor, so it hit them under the floor. And, that's when they busted in, and Ann Whitney was already gone. She had, like I said, 18 arrows in her, and she was already really in terrible shape. So they came in, and one of the Comanches, the leader, was a redhead. Now we're going to talk about this because there's conjecture. Were these really white men dressed as Comanche, or it could have been of like an Adolph Korn. We told that story, Herman Lehman, Adolph Korn. Remember that story where the boys kidnapped? The kids were kidnapped often by the Comanche and the Apache and others, and raised captives and assimilated to the tribe, etc. So you have to wonder. Anyway, it was redhead, and they were speaking partial English, and they said one of them had noticed, they're probably looking through the cracks, and they saw, the boys hiding. They opened the plank, and there are the boys looking up, Lewis and John just cowering. And the redheaded guy looked down at them, and he said, "Do you want to come with us?" And John was so scared, he said, yes, I'll come. But Lewis was obstinate. He said, "No, I will not go." So they stripped down little Lewis, and he had these new cowboy boots. He had these new red-topped cowboy boots that he was so proud of and showing off in town the day before. The settlement was a few miles away, the main settlement. And they stripped him naked. They took his clothes, they took his boots, and they might have killed him, except that somehow he dashed out the door with them chasing one of the. And then you have to imagine the Comanche or whoever it was stumbling and laughing, and he was fast, and he got to the bottom, and they let him go. So it was back to Ann Whitney, who was now pretty much dead, and I'm sure they were at that point pilfering and deciding what they were going to do. And at that moment, there was an Amanda, a woman from the settlement, Amanda Howard, who was actually riding towards the school with her sister-in-law. And she was getting close here. She was coming down the valley, And she saw, and you can just picture this here. Look at this. It's rising terrain. This has to be the direction they were coming. And she's riding down from up there, her and her sister-in-law, and they see two horsemen riding towards them. They recognize that they are Comanche. Now, Amanda's riding this amazing wild horse, half-wild horse, and she turns it. Her sister-in-law gets ahead of her. Her horse is trained. They start riding, and they almost got caught. And they ended up going to the closest house, ranch, if you will, up the valley. That was the Baggots, and there was a fence, and the horses, well, Amanda got her horse to jump, and it successfully jumped, and she ran for the cabin, and her sister-in-law's horse came up to the fence and just stopped, and she went flying. But she was able to roll, I guess, and run. So these guys turned around and went back to the schoolhouse. So now the drama's really unfolding. What's going to happen next? And you have Amanda, now what do we do? And we're stuck here. So Amanda decided that she was going to make a run for the settlement up the valley and get the word out. And but she would have to maneuver around these Comanche, right? So it was a big risk because they were kind of circling. And she made the dash, and they chased her, and she made it with that half-wild Mustang. She outran them and made it to the settlement. And of course they knew it was time to clear out. So they cleared out. They knew there'd be a whole bunch of men coming, and there was. So there was a posse formed, and they chased these guys for maybe 100 miles, and they couldn't catch them, so they gave up. So really, you had Amanda, you had Amelia and Whitney, who paid for it with her life. You have the wounded daughter, the little girl, but she survived. And then, by the way, on the way out, they ended up running into head-on this gang of, if they were Comanche or whatever they were, they ran into a wagon. It was a husband, wife, and some kids, and what did they do? They shot him down, and they shot the wife too, if you can imagine. They shot her too. She survived, he didn't, and then they cleared out. Well, then the posse chased them, like I said, and they didn't catch them. So, yeah, that's where the story ended in here in this valley. And there you see the river. So the schoolhouse was located, we're very close. I don't know the exact spot, but that's where the bend is. And from all my research, it's on this land here. I'm sure it's marked. You can't go there. It's probably known by the owners and a few local people. But so what happened? What happened to John? Well, he spent a couple of years with the Comanche, and he was sold off. And somehow a woman here in the settlement here had read that there was a boy for sale in Kansas, and somehow they put it together, and they went, Isaac, his older brother, traveled to Kansas and got him. It was him, and paid the ransom, or paid the bill, and they got him back. And he said it was bad. He almost forgot the language. He forgot his name. He was already being assimilated, but unlike Adolph Korn, remember the Adolph Korn story where he hated the whites after, and he had totally assimilated, and he was brought back. John was able to re-assimilate and embrace his heritage and his family. So yeah, quite a story. So I think at this point I'm gonna head to the cemetery, the Hamilton Cemetery, and we'll visit the grave of Amelia Ann Whitney and pay our respects there. So let's go. All right, gang, we made it into Hamilton here, the 6-mile drive, and we made it to the cemetery, the historic cemetery. Graves Gentry Cemetery, it says, but this overall is the Hamilton Cemetery. As we pan around, you can see the main road over there. And if you go down the road that way, a block or two or three, you'll go to another cemetery. And if you want to go see the grave of the faker, the guy who said he was Billy the Kid, we did an episode on him a couple of years ago there on a rainy day, cold, icy day. And yeah, I was pretty icy to that story because that guy was pathetic, and I wouldn't go to his grave other than to try to help debunk the stupid story. You know, there's always somebody that wants to, you know, they're a nobody and they want to be famous, so there you go. But anyway, let's focus back on this cemetery, which is the historic cemetery here, and some amazing graves. Let's go to the grave of Ann Whitney and look at some graves on the way. It's not that far over. Just imagine if these stones could talk, right? Yeah, the older graves are over there. So that's where we want to spend our time. We like the older graves, right? Yeah, so, you know, a couple of interesting notes to talk about here. And finishing the story back at the location. Young John, who was taken, he did describe that at one point, just a little more detail on his driving over here, thought of the escape, if you will, of the Comanche. And I want to talk about Comanche versus white too. We're going to talk about that. But one interesting detail is he did say that he did spot the posse far off coming, and they all scattered. So he was left with one Comanche, and a Comanche he was, because he would end up describing where he went and the hard times. You know, it wouldn't just be a band of white men, okay? And his horse was led by one Comanche for days, and, you know, eventually, like I said, got sold off. But I guess I want to talk a little bit about that. You know, they say the red-headed leader of this band of Comanche. So there were a couple of books written, one by Will Barker, the brother of, do you remember the story that I did on the man that lost his scalp? Down, it was in Austin, his grave's in Austin. Interesting story, but I think it was his brother who wrote the book. And then there was another version later by another man who said this whole thing happened in 1861, I think. And that whole book was kind of like a slant towards, it was white men, it wasn't Indians at all, which, by the way, I don't believe. We'll never know, I guess, right? I think it was maybe a mix. There might have been a couple. I mean, the redheaded guy. It wasn't Adolph Korn. We know that because Adolph Korn, it was 3 years later when he was abducted, New Year's Day. That's the other story. But anyway, back to this story. I don't think it could have been, you know, the white man thing. And now the white men, let's just think about this here. The white men if they were going to do that, and they did do that, there's no doubt, but it was to rob and pillage and all of that. I mean, the schoolhouse, what's in the schoolhouse, right? Steal some pencils, steal some books, come on. You know, they were there. Well, it might have just been the initial raid, the first thing that they saw, and they wanted to go from there on a spree, but it just doesn't add up. So it could have been a kidnapped boy that was assimilated, another white boy that was never found, redheaded. Could have been a redheaded Comanche, maybe rare, I don't know. You know, you have Quanah Parker, right? And mom was white, and that whole story. So we'll never know. But I don't think it was just a band of white men dressing up and doing this. So that's kind of just I'd be interested in your opinion on that. What do you guys think? Beautiful day here in Hamilton, Texas, the old cemetery. All right, her grave is right up here. Amelia Ann Whitney. This nice monument and plot they made for her. There it is. And interesting, you got the horseshoes in the corners. I think, of course, this was made much later. These are footstone. And then you have the monument itself, which is, you can still read it. You know, it does say in memory of Ann Whitney. I think it says I can't read that. She was born in Massachusetts. There. And there it is now. It says July 5th, 1867. So maybe it wasn't the 11th, right? The tombstone should know. And then you have a description here. Ann Whitney, 1839. She was 38 years old. And she was born in Conway, Franklin County, Massachusetts. I know that. September 13th, 1828. It's described as a stout lady with an engaging personality. Elizabeth Ann. Oh, interesting. Elizabeth. I thought it was Amelia. Anyway. Oh, history. You gotta love it. No matter how much research you do, you just never know what's right and not. But Elizabeth Ann Whitney confirmed that she could be strong, brave, and resourceful. So, I'm picturing a 38-year-old stout woman born in Massachusetts. She was probably one tough cookie. And a fateful day in 1867, teacher at the nearby frontier school. Suddenly, during the course of a typical school day, a party of Comanche Indians attacked and reportedly pierced her. Yep, 18 arrows during the ordeal. And she nevertheless helped all but one young boy escape before dying herself. So that was made in 1993. You can bet the flag hangs here typically. But there it is. Beautiful monument here. Beautiful setting here in Hamilton, Texas. Well, I'd be putting the, you guys, if you watch the channel, you know I put the yellow rose down. Forgot the yellow rose. And I looked in Hamilton and there's no place to buy a yellow rose that I could find. I did try, so you know, we'll do the virtual rose. Maybe I'll put a picture somewhere here with Ann Whitney. We can only wonder what she looked like. Wouldn't it be great if we had a picture of her? I can see her in my imagination. But yeah, quite a story it is. American pioneer history. And it went both ways. The good, the bad, the ugly. But the whites came and took over and would eventually win. All right, that's the story here from Texas, Hamilton. And we'll see you on the next one. Rest in peace, Ann Whitney. Rest in peace.